What language did you speak in school? Was it hard or not? Did it help or hurt your ability to read, speak, and write in class? Well, that's the debate going on about language in classrooms across Africa. Should children be taught in their mother tongue first? That's the language they speak at home, the language they understand. Or should their primary language of instruction be a more global one that might further their career prospects? Well, that's our focus this week. I'm Hayde Adams FitzPatrick. Ayenbiyo and Orion Itangishaka are out, but I've got some help here this week. Madina Maishanu from VOA's Hausa News Service is here. Also joining us is Mwamoyo Hamza. He's the chief of VOA's Swahili News Service. And Jackson Mvunganyi, host of VOA's youth-focused talk show, Upfront. Welcome back to Our Voices.
Thank you, Hayde.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Now, we're talking mother tongue education. Now, in countries like Japan, Korea, almost all of Europe and North America, children are being taught in their home language first. Should we do the same in Africa? And we also want to bring you into this conversation. You can find us here at VOA Our Voices. We're also on WhatsApp. That number is on your screen. So talk to us on social media throughout the show. Do you agree? Do you not agree? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go around. We'll do a little bit of a round robin. Tell me, what was the language that you learned at school versus the language that you spoke at home?
First day at school, Swahili language.
Wow.
Yes.
And that was the language, obviously, you spoke at home as well?
And that was the language that I was speaking at home also.
Wow. Jackson?
Yeah, English. And at home, I was speaking at least about 10 languages by the time I was 10 years old.
Wow, that's not exhausting at all. And Madina?
For me, at school, I spoke Dutch because I grew up in Holland, but I spoke Hausa at home.
Wow. So I spoke Afrikaans at home, English at school, almost never English at home. You know, it was very interesting for me to see that Rwanda made this announcement late last year that English would, as of this year, be the primary language of instruction at schools. Now, that sounds very familiar when decrees come out like that, right, and that teachers and kids have to adapt to that. Just give us an update, Jackson. This is your home country.
Right.
Give us an update on this decision.
Well, for people who probably don't know the history of the country, they went through a genocide in 1994. There were large populations of people that migrated back or came back home from places like Uganda, like myself, you know, born and raised in Uganda as a refugee, returned in 1994. Many others came from the DRC, from Burundi, and many others who had stayed and survived the genocide. So the government had a responsibility to educate all these people, but they were not sure what language, what's the primary language. And in 2008, after back and forth, I think a lot of debate, they decided that English was the best language of instruction in schools. Then in 2012, they brought back, I think 2012 or 2011, they brought back French as a subject or as a language of instruction, side by side with English. Then in 2015, they came up with another decree that's, the Education Ministry that said that the first couple of years in school, students or pupils will be taught in Kinyarwanda, which is our mother tongue, and that was supposed to roll out in 2020 this year. But at the end of 2019, they reversed that because there was an outcry from teachers and parents and students. They didn't feel that they were ready yet. So the country now has, Kinyarwanda, which is the mother tongue, French, and English, all being taught in schools, but primarily students are being taught in English.
I think people forget that Africans are the most linguistically diverse people on the planet.
Absolutely.
I mean, for us, we will speak multiple languages.
Yeah.
That is normal. So these decisions are all hard. Tanzania flipped the script and took another path, making Swahili not just the national language, but also the primary language of instruction.
Yeah, from very early on, that's what Tanzania did. And this became so because of the vision that Julius Nyerere, then the president of Tanzania, had. He was going around the country, during campaigning for independence, and he realized that the country has more than 100 ethnic groups, and they all speak different languages. So how do I communicate with these people? And he figured Swahili should be the language. And by then, Swahili was you could say well developed in Tanzania. From the 18th century, there was Swahili literature written in Arabic script. So Swahili was from the beginning a literary language. There was a lot of literature. In the early 1900s, there was a move to start standardizing it. And, then you had a lot of great, literary, giants, such as Shaban Robert, who was a great poet, Sheikh Farsi, and there are many others in Kenya who were writing in Swahili literature. So that foundation was already there. So for Tanzania to make the decision that Swahili should be the medium of instruction at primary school I would say, wasn't a very difficult one, and it has endured over the years up to today, even though there are so many other people who speak their tribal languages. But when they come to primary school, first day in class, standard 1, or even kindergarten, they speak in Swahili. And then you have private schools who do that in English. Yeah. But when you go to secondary school, that's when you encounter English as a medium of instruction.
Do you also encounter problems?
Yes, you do. Because you see, anytime you encounter a language that's not yours from the beginning, your mother tongue, especially in an academic setting, it becomes difficult. The thing is, you may speak the language, but you may not be able to do a lot with it.
Right. Or understand really complicated concepts.
Yeah, and Mvunganyi, you can attest to this. For us, people who have multiple languages, and we are in school, we're studying in English, and you find yourself, you are limited to the textbooks,
yes.
to the script, to the textbook.
Absolutely.
Your mind doesn't have the language capacity to wander away.
To think creatively, yes. Because it is one thing to speak a language,
yes.
but it's also another different thing to think creatively in that language.
As that might work for a lot of people, this brings me back to myself. I grew up in Holland, and even though I didn't know how to speak Dutch at first, because I moved there when I was very young, I catched up very fast. Just put yourself in the shoes of kids like me that had to move from Holland back to Nigeria. I knew everything in Dutch. I knew their curriculum, I knew their mode of study, everything I knew was in Dutch. So I had to move back to Nigeria and then start everything all over again. That was kind of hard for me. And even when I was in Holland, I spoke a different language at home, and then I spoke a different language in school. It was kind of hard for me to, so that mode might work for some countries, but for countries like where I came from.
Yes, even in Tanzania, it's been very successful. Swahili, by the time people get out of primary school, they are solid with Swahili. That foundation is there. That's why there's this national cohesion of Swahili-speaking people in Tanzania. There's no doubt about that. But when they get to secondary school, because English is an official language in Tanzania, government business is conducted in English as well as Swahili. But even present day, there is still a debate, whether should we really stay with Swahili as a medium of instruction in primary school, or should we move to English? Because
but are there enough jobs for them?
No, it's working very well. There are jobs everywhere, and by the time you finish, you go to secondary school and you go to university, you are competent in English, and you function well in English, and you have the advantage of also knowing your national language.
So it's kind of like spread out.
Yeah,
they
so
start with Swahili,
yeah.
and then they jump into English.
There's a Swahili-speaking customer base for almost everything, because people do it. And I think
Yes.
Tanzania is lucky in that sense that you have this one language that unites. And for us, we don't just in South Africa have these 11 official languages to try and be more inclusive, but it also puts people in their pockets. You don't just have sort of these tensions in society, but as a child growing up where language is such a contentious issue, you also have these conflicts inside of you.
Right.
I was always too ashamed to even say that we spoke Afrikaans at home, because if you're a person of color, Afrikaans is seen as a language of the under or uneducated. I many times wish that we also spoke English at home, because at school, this is a language that parents put their kids in English school so that they can be, they can have greater economic prospects.
To be more proficient, which is something you find, I think, in most parts of Africa. When you look at middle-class societies, many of them encourage their kids to speak the language of, quote-unquote, the colonizer, whether it's French or English. Yeah. And they feel like that if you speak the local language, then it puts you at a disadvantage in your career, going forward.
That there's no economic value,
there's no value to
in
it,
the mother tongue. And that goes back to creating jobs for people so they know they have a future.
And there's a certain social status attached with the colonial language.
Yeah, exactly.
You
with
speak
speaking
English,
it.
you speak French, people assume that you are educated person.
Right, and more so if it's French, Francophone Africa. Remember, the French and the British had different ways of, different ways of colonizing.
Right.
For the French, attachment. It was assimilation, so there's that cultural attachment to the language. Yes. In British, colonies like Uganda, where I grew up, you could speak English, but also you're able to speak other languages.
Right.
When I say that I spoke, by the age of 10, I spoke 10 languages. That's not because I'm smarter than everybody else.
No, you are.
It was just a function of the society that I was in. Everybody spoke that, multiple languages at that age. And now, for me, as a kid who was a refugee, I had, much more to learn. The challenges that I faced navigating that society were harder. So I felt the pressure to learn more languages and try to fit in within each society or community that I would live with. But you find that you can easily navigate or move from one language to the other seamlessly without even being conscious about it.
Well, I have renewed respect for all of you knowing this background. But Jackson, since you've just bragged about 10 languages you speak, we're going to test that a little bit later on the show. When we ask you about another language you probably didn't think of while you were bragging. But
I'm sure he doesn't know.
We'll test you on that. Well, after the break, 11 official languages and a violent history with language in schools. We'll look at South Africa's Mother Tongue Challenge and what that nation can teach and learn from other countries on the continent. We'll speak to an expert in South Africa next. Being part of Our Voices is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them.
And bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
You're watching Our Voices. Welcome back. Now, we're talking mother tongue education, and one country that's seen decades-long tension over the language of instruction in schools is South Africa, a nation of 11 official languages. English is the language of business and government in that country, and for the most part, it's the language of education. Most South Africans can speak it, but for more than 90% of the country, that is not their mother tongue. Take a look at this. Zulu is the most popular, spoken by around half of the nation. 27 million people say they use the language. Xhosa, just over 19 million people speak that language. Then there is Afrikaans. About 17 million South Africans say they're proficient in it. But historically, Afrikaans was used by the apartheid government to essentially divide and conquer people. In the 70s, Afrikaans, which is derived predominantly from Dutch, was forced on non-Afrikaans speaking black South African students as the main language of instruction in schools. The consequences were disastrous and deadly as students revolted in June of 1976 as part of the Soweto uprising, and they were met with fierce police brutality. Today, language remains a touchy subject. Well, earlier I spoke to someone who knows all about this. Somikazi Deyi, she's a lecturer at the University of Cape Town in the African Languages Department. She spoke to me via Skype from Cape Town, South Africa. Somikazi Deyi, thank you so very much for joining us. Molo Unjani.
Hello, Hayde Unjani, wena sisi?
Dipilile Nkosi. The South African Constitution guarantees every student in the country the right to be educated in their mother tongue. Is this really happening, though? What's the reality?
Students are taught in the language that is not their own. Small scale language use or mother tongue education is happening in some parts of the country like the Eastern Cape, where you'll find students learning subjects such as mathematics in Hausa. It's happening by people who really feel that they've got advocacy for language development or mother tongue use, because in any case, when students whose mother language is other than English, when they are taught in the language that they do not understand, this is superficial learning that we're talking about. This is a deficit method that we're talking about. The detrimental effect is that they do not really develop fully.
What is better for a child's development, and what is better for a child's economic prospects within the context of African countries?
Mother tongue, Hayde, is always the best. The notion that English is best is just coming from thinking that if you speak English well, you'll be able to work, which is not really true. Because if I operate a heart as a doctor, I don't need any particular language. I just need the science of doing the job.
Are our languages, our mother tongue languages,
Yes.
intellectualized to the point where I can become a doctor, or I can reach, the highest level of, my academic aspirations? Or is that still the challenge? Is that still the gap?
We have enough vocabulary to intellectualize African languages. The issue is that none of this is getting the kind of attention it deserves. We've got enough concepts in mathematics. When I say enough, I'm referring to basic concepts that are needed for math, that are needed for science, and needed for health. Like at UCT, you do not graduate as a doctor if you cannot speak Hausa or you cannot speak Afrikaans, which is really encouraging people to learn the next person's language. But if you haven't mastered your mother tongue, how then do you even begin to tap into the next person's language without mastering yours? And this is the call when we say government, get real, put more money into this. Because once government has a buy-in and a political will to make sure that this happens, then it doesn't happen in silos getting tested, but it becomes a fully fledged program. Because indeed, a language is for every child. There are language rights that have to be maintained and that have to be sustained and that have to be observed in making sure that they become citizens who can participate fully in the economic sector. We can have translation, we can work as translators, we can develop just a body of knowledge. We write books, we write stories. That means we can produce our own movies in the language that we speak. There are lots of apps that are being produced. That's all encouraging use of mother tongue among students themselves. So there is prospects in using your mother tongue. Come on, we can do this.
Somikazi Deyi there from the University of Cape Town, speaking to me from Cape Town, South Africa. Now we're going to take a short break, and after that our panel is back and we'll ask how you day, the power of Nigerian pidgin English. We're also going to get a pidgin lesson right here in studio, and something tells me we are about to get schooled. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. Now, if you're not from West Africa and like me, you can't speak any form of pidgin, I suggest you get on that. It's spoken by tens of millions of people in places like Nigeria, Senegal, Cameroon, Ghana, and Sierra Leone, to name a few. Now, each country has a different version. Pidgin began as a trade language. It's a mixture of languages made up to help people who didn't have one common way to communicate. And today it is used by many as their first language, some saying it's time pidgin is recognized as an official language and that it's outgrown its pidgin status. So we're very lucky that in studio today we're going to do a little bit of an experiment around pidgin with someone who knows and understands the language. How far, Madina?
How far now? Do you know what I just
that's
said?
all I know.
So Pidgin language is something that is widely spoken in Nigeria by like 5 million people have it as their first language, 75 million people have it as their second language. Even in households that they speak other languages like Yoruba or Hausa, you would find that you must find someone that speaks Pidgin because it's like the common language that people use to understand each other. It's just English but broken. Right. In fact, I think last month, it was last month, a few Pidgin words were added to the Oxford English Dictionary.
Right, that was exciting.
Now, do people in the South speak the same type of Pidgin, say, in the North?
It's one type of Pidgin. It's the same type of Pidgin all through Nigeria.
Because you see, in some places, you see a variation of a language when it moves up north or south or west. Even if they're speaking the same language, there are certain variations and nuances.
You see, that's the purpose of Pidgin. The thing is, people from the South, people from the West, and people from the North speak differently. But that Pidgin is what unites them. Is what keeps. Pidgin is not even a language that has a specific word. You can just sit down and form something. You can make up words.
So if I made up something, you'd understand at least.
Yes, you just have to say it in a way
that
would make it. That's what Pidgin is about.
I've been making up a lot of Pidgin words the last few days, and you didn't understand any of that.
Pidgin runs tribal lines, and everybody can speak. Is a language that can bring everybody together. You know, when they are, they have to have a dialogue across tribal lines. But, as Jackson says, there are other countries, say, in West Africa, which speak, different kind of Pidgin. There's Sierra Leone, Ghana, Cameroon. Nigerians may not necessarily understand.
I mean, they would understand at least up to a point, maybe 60% of it, but those flavors of the local language.
So you sound like Let's play a little game. Let's play a little game. So let's play a little game. Let's play a little game. Okay. What do you know any Pidgin word? You just said how far. Do you know any Pidgin word?
I know.
Do you know what kata kata is?
Chop chop.
No.
It's like a dog.
Kata kata means. When you say kata kata, how does it sound to you?
Cutting?
No, it sounds like you're scattering something.
Or like trash.
Kata kata means war.
Scattering.
Yes.
It means
what?
War.
Oh, fighting.
War. Yes.
Oh, you're starting on a very violent note, but okay.
That's what I said. Pidgin is about making up stuff that can. You just need to explain what you feel or what you're trying to say. It doesn't necessarily have to be a word.
So if I were to start a war, I just go, I want to kata kata.
Okay. So I would say this: the structure then appears to be kind of physical in terms of the actual thing that you are doing.
What it sounds like.
And you'll find that even in English, let's say, as you know, here in America, Native Americans, they tend to have names of places according to the physical surroundings. Bended knee. When you go to Bended Knee, there's a rock that looks like a bended knee.
Which makes so much sense. And I think that's one thing Pidgin has this practicality about it.
Okay, throw something at me.
I'm not going to say Wahala Day because I know you all know what Wahala Day is.
Yeah.
So do you know what, which kind Tori you they talk?
What? Say again?
Which kind Tori you they talk?
They talk
I don't
English.
know.
He understands what I mean.
What did he say? What is it?
What are you talking about? You didn't.
Which was my question. I just didn't know what it was.
But you were saying. I thought you said what language.
You just maneuvered yourself around it. Okay, why you they vex?
Why
are you causing me? But why are you upsetting me?
Why are you angry?
Why you they vex?
Why are you angry or why are you upsetting me?
Why are you upset?
Oh, okay.
But you actually got it because you understood what vexed is.
Right. Now, I don't speak 10 languages.
Waiting the shelle.
I know that one.
No, if you know
Say again,
it.
what's in the shelle?
Waiting the shelle.
What is in the shell?
Waiting the shelle. Jackson, tell them what's waiting the shelle.
I cannot figure that out.
It's like, what's up? What's going on?
Yeah, it's what's up.
Yeah.
Okay,
and the thing is, Jackson, no. You know, I know where you get your words from.
I know that specific one because a couple of years ago, somebody sent me a voicemail from Nigeria, a fan of the show, and they said, "Waiting the shelle."
Oh, that's how you know it. Yeah. Because I know you listen to a lot of music.
I do too. That too.
A lot of people know how to speak Pidgin English all over the world because of how far Nigerian music is traveling right now. And a lot of Nigerian musicians, almost half of their lyrics in their songs are spoken in Pidgin.
That's a great point.
Yes.
You know, Afrobeats has mainstreamed Pidgin to the diaspora and to other communities that did not know that this language existed.
But you know, that's not happening with Pidgin only. Swahili musician, what they call bongo flavor in East Africa, goes across, a lot of African countries.
Yeah.
I saw kids in Sierra Leone singing a Swahili song by Diamond because it's just a popular music right now.
Right.
So, and as well, kids in East Africa, they would be singing, songs in Pidgin from
Yes.
P Square,
Yeah.
Whiskey, Davido.
Yeah.
The
So
kids
that's
are
like
singing
a
about
common
whiskey?
language.
No, whiskey.
Whiskey?
Well, one woman has recognized that one way to really expose people to Pidgin is through music and the arts, and she's just absolutely amazing. We want to play a little bit of her music opera for you. Just take a listen.
My name is Helen Epega, and I be the composer for the world's first Pidgin English opera, Song Queen, a Pidgin opera. I just wasn't able to communicate with people and the way that I wanted to. And then being in Lagos, you hear so many different languages and so many different tribes. But the one thing we all speak, the one language, is Pidgin. So I thought to myself, I want to unite people, and if I want to speak to as many Nigerians, it should be in Pidgin. It made sense to me, and then the Pidgin opera was born. As a Nigerian, sometimes people will talk about their tribe or, family background before saying that they're Nigerians, but that's where we are now. And we have so many millions of people under the age of 30 looking for what their identity is. So I want to create an identity through the arts that inspires pride, and people should be happy and feel strong and feel hopeful. And I really do believe that music can end all wars.
Well, isn't that amazing how you can really use music? I think this is very, very innovative of her. Now, it's time for us to come out. Is that okay?
Yes, that's okay.
I'd like to thank our wonderful colleagues Jackson Mvunganyi and Mwamoyo Hamza. Thank you so much for being here today.
And we are promoting right now.
We're promoting. Thank you very much, Madina, for being here as well. But I'm going to leave it to you to close the show today.
Our people know now, so we take reach the end of our 2020 today. I want to use this opportunity to invite you back to our show. This show na show where African hosts they sit down talk things we concern our Mama Africa. Nami be Madina Maishanu for the show where they call our voices, all the way from Washington, where they America.
Yes, everything she said. And that's our show, everyone. Thank you for watching. We leave you with Chop My Money by P Square featuring Akon and Maydi, sung mostly in Pidgin, as you'll notice. Until next time, Salakashle, Kwaheri, goodbye, una bye bye.